right, Tim, listen, the vision is fantastic, but I couldn't sleep all last night about learning more about, this next stage, because I've been obsessing about where Ferdinand's going to go and what they're going to accomplish. So talk to me. Where do we go? How do we move into stage two?
Hey, hold on to the rail of the ship, Renick, because it only gets crazier from here. So now this is chapter 2.
Right.
So this is the opportunistic stage of the corporate life cycle. So if you remember, in the last video, we talked about the vision stage.
Right.
Great deal of excitement, anticipation. We built our product. We got some initial feedback. We fine-tuned the ship.
Right.
I mean, we're ready to hit the open seas, so we think.
Right.
So now we're entering the opportunistic stage of our journey. Right. And there, Renick speeding westward away from the bay. And the town starts to shrink behind them. Right. And the wind begins to intensify. Now, Gabriella, if you remember, she's our head of sales. She's in charge of the sailing system.
Sure.
She's starting to anxiously note the increasing tension and strain on the conifer masts. And below deck, Jorge hears the loud roar of the heightening waves smashing into the hull of the ship with a ferocity, frankly, he never anticipated during construction. And holding on tight at the railing, at the bow of the ship, Diego pulls out her nautical telescope and she gazes forward to spot 2 ships quickly approaching from a distance. And she focuses in on these vessels, Renick, and she spots the familiar forecastle and stern castle common among the pirate ships she encountered years earlier with Vega Morelos on the high seas.
Wow.
And she's also noting the sheer number of cannons they have mounted on the deck of those pirate ships. And she's got to think to herself, how could those ships be moving so quickly given their weight?
Right.
And so this is their first test on the open seas, and it's coming quicker than anyone had anticipated.
Right.
So she calls Jingo and she says, gather your crew and man your stations. And so Jingo and his crew now are scrambling. They scramble below deck to grab the gunpowder and the ammunition for the deck cannons.
Right.
And while wiping the ocean spray from his eyes, Ferdinand is screaming to Gabriella, urging her to turn northward to avoid the advancing pirate vessels.
Right.
And she turns into the wind. She begins a series of tacking maneuvers from starboard to port, which dramatically slows the ship's overall speed.
Right.
And she immediately turns to Ferdinand, who at once recognizes the error in his command. So now the pirate ships are advancing. The window for an about face is quickly passed. And she's just doing her best to keep the ship as steady as possible as our Grace angrily rocks back and forth from starboard to port.
Oh my God.
Now, while this is happening, Jorge, below deck, Jorge and his crew, Renick, they're shouldering the hull, right? As if they could fight the raging ocean on the other side. They're in full anticipation of a leak. And now 2 of his crew are running back from the supply room with a bucket of tar.
Right.
When they're all of a sudden knocked from their feet. So there's a direct hit scored from the lead pirate ship. 30 feet to the stern, the oak wood of the hull explodes and sends splinters clear across the ship and hits one of his crew in the upper thigh. So he's laying there writhing in pain, and you can imagine now panic is setting in among the crew.
Right, of course.
And they're all fleeing in all directions, aiding their crewmate, repairing the damage, running up above deck to alert the crew above.
Right.
And above on the main deck, Jingo again is rushing the armament and his crew into position to return fire. Right. And they're zigzagging across the deck. It was very clear they were just ill prepared for an effective counter-assault.
Right.
And they're struggling to haul the ammo up from below deck. They recognize just the inefficiencies and how they're distributing these cannonballs to the ship's many gun ports.
Right.
But just as Jingo arms and aims this cannon to return fire, this horrendous roar lets out from the mainsail. All of a sudden, you see this 8-foot gash rip through the upper third of the sail. Now, I don't know if you've ever been on a boat, Renick, that when you has a serious wind change, but as you can imagine, the hard change in the wind direction rocks the ship abruptly to port.
Right, yeah.
And all of a sudden, the loaded cannon was thrown from its ready position. So here they were ready, and now that's gone. And so Jingo and his crew now are scrambling to reposition the cannon and return fire. And meanwhile, a second shot scores a direct hit on the main deck. So here they are, they're still reeling from the first hit. Jorge and his crew down below are scrambling to repair the damage and tar the small leaks which have begun to emerge on the hull. And now the whole crew is just running furiously, screaming and yelling orders and filling in wherever they could just to keep the ship afloat and fight off these incoming vessels. So in the midst of this chaos, Jingo finally gets off his first shot. And it's exactly where you want to hit. He miraculously scores a direct hit on the lead pirate ship right at the waterline, right? So that lead pirate ship immediately starts taking on water and begins to list. Now, the whole crew, of course, lets out this very excited roar.
Right.
So this goes on. They battle on with the second ship, Renick, throughout the night. Really no rest or let up in the action. And amid this intensity of the battle, time just appears to stand still for Ferdinand. He's got gunfire going on around him, and he's reflecting on the calm waters of the protected bay and his dream of sailing Our Grace to the New World. And he's seeing this fighting take place and take several of his crew. And now he could only hope and pray that he would live to see the next morning.
Right.
So fast forward, the sun rises over the horizon the next morning. A warm breeze sweeps over the deck of Our Grace. And the only sound which could be heard was the creaking of a broken mast and the rolling of the remaining cannonballs along the deck.
Right.
And sprawled out on the deck of the ship, Ferdinand slowly opens his eyes to the glaring sunrise. His clothes, Renick, are soaked and in tatters. His body is aching in pain from the previous night's battle. And he awkwardly arises to take stock of Our Grace. He starts walking slowly towards the stern of the ship and is just at once overtaken by the damage to his Our Grace. The masts are broken, the armament's destroyed, the water's leaking into the hull.
Wow.
Really, his ship is a mere shadow of its former self.
Right.
And he's stumbling into other survivors, and they each begin to tell their story of the previous night's events. And it was through these encounters that he estimated he lost about a quarter of his crew just from these unexpected dangers of the open seas.
Wow.
So you can imagine his dreams are dashed, and he peers towards the rising sun and incidentally his hometown over the horizon. And he recognizes his new and great responsibility to the crew of Our Grace. The new world pretty much out of sight. His foremost challenge now is returning his loyal crew back to shore in the care of their loving families. And he's grappling with this new dilemma. And as he's doing so, his eyes start to squint to make out a silhouette approaching now from the east. And we'll end there. And that's the opportunistic stage of the corporate life cycle.
We'll end there?
We'll end there.
All right. No.
And you may ask, Renick, why is it the opportunistic stage? Why did
I was.
So if you recall from our initial video, we talked about bringing our product to market and getting some feedback that we didn't exactly anticipate, right? I think we used the analogy of, hey, we got this great knife set for all the cooks in the kitchen.
Yes.
And the customer came back and told us they love our knives, but they didn't want to use them in the kitchen. They wanted to use them on the fishing docks.
Oh, right.
So in the process of jockeying with our first few customers, it's often in the B2B world, all hands on deck, right? As we have to react to the feedback real time.
Yeah. Nice.
And we don't have time to bring our product back to the comforting waters of the Bay of Cadiz. This is a large enterprise client We're starving for revenue, looking to get to the first stages of growth. And we have to make some decisions real time. We're not thinking at that point, where do we want to be in a year or two? We're just trying to make it to next month.
Right. Yeah. Look, we got to pay the bills. We got bills to pay.
Yeah. So these decisions not only affect the future of the business, but they also affect who elects to stick around to see the next leg of the journey. So
and now we have a silhouette of something coming over the horizon, and I'm literally on the edge of my seat.
So we'll see what the silhouette is. In the next video, we're going to explore the optimization stage. And that's where we're going to have to make some choices about how we rebuild our grace, right? If we want to stay on this journey.
Right.
And we're going to have to find some money and some funding to do just that.
Okay.
So stay tuned.
I'm staying tuned.
To chapter 3.
Nice.